Good afternoon, folks. I would like to begin this afternoon by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land, which we all call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this nation home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can each, in our own way, move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. My name is Gunnar Lomp. I usually go by the first name Ken, and I'm the current president of the College of Registered Psychotherapists, the CRPO. I'm pleased to welcome you to this, the first of 9 town halls that we will be hosting in this fiscal year. Today's session has a general State of the Union agenda, and Deb will walk us through that in detail. We will cover a number of topics at a high level that will be the subject of in-depth town halls throughout the rest of the year. Topics include updates on each of the core regulatory areas, information about the work we are doing to ensure we are all trauma-informed, and that the principles of DEI anchor all of our processes and initiatives that we will be working on this year to further support provide support for registrants in providing safe and effective care and decision-making in the public interest. We will be sending out updates to
Ken, sorry, your mic has turned off. You appear to be on mute.
Thanks, Deb. Sorry about that, folks. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, I guess some people just didn't want to listen to me. Anyway, I'll go back a little bit. I'll start off with topics again in what I was going to speak about. So the topics include, over the course of the town halls, include updates on each of the core regulatory areas, information about the work we are doing to ensure we are trauma-informed, and that the principles of DEI anchor all of our processes and initiatives that we will be working on this year to further support for registrants in providing safe and effective care and decision-making in the public interest. We will be sending out updates to remind you of which topics will be presented over the coming months. These town halls will be held at 8 in the morning, over the lunch hour, and at the end of the day in an effort to provide the most flexibility. We hope some of these times will work for each of you. All of the sessions will be recorded and available on the college's YouTube channel so that they can be accessed later. You'll see email and website updates for the coming sessions, and you are encouraged to keep, sorry about this, to keep track of them, provide feedback on questions you would like to see answered in these sessions, and provide feedback on what you'd like to see answered in these sessions. We are pleased to have the opportunity to engage with our registrants and look forward to connecting over the course of the year. I'm in my second term as president, and I've been involved with the college for quite some time. In fact, my hair was a different color, truly was, and I had substantially more of it when I first started, and that was back in 2011. In 2011, I was privileged to be invited to sit on the working group that developed the entry to practice competencies. The competencies were being established for 2 categories of registrants: registered psychotherapists and registered mental health therapists. The latter group was to be made up primarily of practitioners trained at the college level. At the time, I was a program coordinator of and a professor in the Addictions and Mental Health Graduate Certificate Program at Durham College. In those days, the working group and the Transitional Council brought together a diverse mix of psychotherapists from many modalities who had differing historical understandings of the term psychotherapy. That led to many interesting discussions regarding the proposed titles, registered psychotherapist and registered mental health therapist. Ultimately, after proclamation in 2015, the college was not granted the authority to regulate college-trained practitioners, and the RMT title was abandoned. In 2013, I was appointed to the Transitional Council and served on council through 2015. I was then elected to council in 2017. What struck me about council then, and to some degree has remained the case through to the present day, is that psychotherapists working in the public sector for healthcare facilities and community agencies were and are underrepresented on council. Having professional experience in higher education, private practice, and in a public healthcare facility, I appreciate the differences in those roles. To my mind, council works best when we have the richness of input that comes from representation from all three sectors. So when Amy speaks to the issue of elections, give that some fulsome consideration. During my 13 years with the CRPO, I've had the opportunity to work with and learn from some truly inspiring leaders. Among those are Carol Cowan-Levine, who was the president during the early years of the college, Andrew Benedetto, who followed Carol, and most recently, Sherry Briscoe-Dimick. None of them, nor I, could imagine the incredible growth that we've seen in the profession. In the early years of the council, the prediction was for a total of 3,000 to 3,500 registrants. If we were lucky, we now exceed 13,000, and the college continues to grow. With growth comes complexity and increased work for the college. Fortunately, I'm pleased to say that under the leadership of our registrar, Deb Adams, the growth, complexity, and high level of work have been managed spectacularly well. A former colleague of mine, who is now the registrar of another health college, described Deb to me as a spark plug. On that note, I will turn it over to Amy and Deb.
Thanks, Ken, and thanks everyone for being here today, for joining us for our first town hall of the year. So just some usual Zoom housekeeping etiquette. I know we're all sort of used to Zoom now, but please keep your microphones off unless you're speaking, and feel free to use the Q&A feature in Zoom if you have any questions as we go through the presentations. We're going to save those questions for the end, but appreciate that you might want to add them in there as we go. Also, please note that the presentation today is being recorded, as Ken noted in his introductory remarks, so that people who weren't able to make it here today can watch this at their convenience later on. The slides will also be posted along with the video so that you'll have access to any links that we have in the slides. So just wanted to, put it out there that we are currently accepting nominations for 3 positions that we have available on council. The nomination period closes on May 1st, so you still have 1 week to submit your nomination. If you're in districts 1, 5, or 6, covering a sort of the western part of the province, you may be eligible to put your name forward for nomination. So if you are interested in serving on council, it provides, registrants with the opportunity to contribute to public protection, bring unique perspectives to the table. Then we would definitely encourage you to put your name forward and complete the nomination package and get it in before the deadline next week. And with that, happy to hand it over to Deb to get started.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Ken. And thank you, everybody, for being here. It's great to have so many people attending. As Ken and Amy have noted, this is our first town hall of 9. And so really, we've just chosen to do the high-level overview of a whole bunch of topics to give people a quick review of the year and some insight into what's coming in the next year or two, but also to give you sort of, to whet your appetite in the hopes that you'll think about attending future town halls to look at specific topics or to actually watch videos of town halls that you've missed. So we will be covering many of the topics that are coming up. If you don't hear any of the information that you were hoping to hear today, then if we could roll to the next slide, please, Virginia, you'll see that we have already scheduled up until the end of the calendar year. We will be posting these topics and making sure that people are aware of them. And we'll also be inviting you to submit questions relative to those particular topics over the course of the coming months. I will note that we've left time at the end for questions, and we will be trying to answer if there's anything, sort of that's just a really specific date-related question or something that we can answer back in the question and answer function. We will try to do that. We're also planning to publish at the end of probably every 2 or 3, depending on the volume of questions that we get, some specific answers to specific questions. And then finally, at the end of the year, we'll publish the whole set so people can see them and can refer back to them. We'll incorporate them into our website. Some of the questions that we got today, we are going to try and answer in the course of the presentation. Some of them were sort of more probably suited to other topics to come. So you may not hear, if you posed a question, you may not hear the answer today, but please don't despair. It's not that we're not planning to answer it. It's just that we're going to get to it over the course of the next 12 months as a way to sort of engage with registrants. I'm going to pass this off to Alexandra. As I said, I'm going to let staff introduce themselves as they make their presentations, and I'll be back later on to present on a few of the topics. So thank you.
Great, thank you. My name is Alexandra Brennan. I'm the manager for registration at CRPO, and I'm going to be providing some updates on application reviews, and then as well the registration exam. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a summary of the applications we've received over the past year. We received about 2,300 applications total. And as you can see, that's actually quite similar to the number we received last year. The majority of applications continue to be through the recognized program route. At this point, we have 28 recognized and accepted programs, and so that's been expanding dramatically over the years. And so at this point, the vast majority of applications are through that route. About 6% are through the non-recognized route, and then I think it's less than 1% are through the other application routes, so labor mobility, Indigenous registration pathway, and temporary. Next slide, please. In terms of application processing timelines, I can give the average timelines for applications approved over the past quarter. So that's January to March 2024. On average, applications through the recognized program route.
Yeah, I'm just going to look around and I grab something else.
Sorry. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Applications through the recognized program route were approved within 33 days of submission. That includes time spent if the applicant needed to provide more information or more documentation. Applications through the non-recognized route were approved in an average of 99 days, or about 3¼ months. And those applications they're typically more complex. They require detailed review of the mapping tool to establish substantial equivalency of education, and so they do tend to take longer. And then the labor mobility route, applications were approved on average in 3 days after submission. Applicants can monitor what month is under review and the status of their application. There are 2 resources for that. One is that they can look in their CRPO user account. The application portal will show the current status of their application, whether it's at the first review, second review, etc. And then as well, the CRPO website shows the current month of review the current month of applications under review. So currently we are reviewing applications submitted through the recognized program route, submitted in April, and for the non-recognized route, submitted end of January into February. And that that application timeline page also has information about the typical timelines for those routes. So you can see that linked in the presentation, and you'll have access to that after the meeting. Okay, next slide, please. So these are some statistics from the past 2 sittings of the registration exam. The exam takes place in the fall and in the spring. And so at the April 2022 sitting, there were 529 writers with a pass rate of 89%. At the October 2023 sitting, there were 646 writers with a pass rate of 93%. And so coming up, there is an exam sitting next week on May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And then tentative dates for the fall sitting have also been posted. So that it will be taking place November 6th, 7th, and 8th. We will confirm those dates and provide information about sign up for the fall sitting coming this summer. That will probably open in late July. Next slide, please. So then finally, for my part, we wanted to share information about a new resource that is available. This supervision tool is meant to support qualifying registrants as they prepare for the registration exam. And so it has 5 modules for the registrant and their supervisor to work through together. So it's really meant to support the supervision process. It includes reviewing the supervision agreement, reviewing CRPO's entry to practice competencies, and then developing a learning plan based on that self-reflection process to eventually support writing the registration exam. The tool was piloted in 2023. We got some great feedback from the people who participated in that pilot. And so the exam committee just approved the final version with minor changes this past week. So that final version will be posted to the website soon and then also shared in an upcoming communique. And we hope this will be a useful resource for qualifying registrants as they participate in supervision and prepare for the exam. Thank you. Sorry, I'll hand it over to Mark at this point.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Mark Pioro, the Deputy Registrar and General Counsel at CRPO. And on the next slide, I will just mention for everyone some changes that are upcoming to CRPO's definition of a clinical supervisor. A new definition was approved last year after a great deal of research, discussion, and consultation. It takes effect in April 2026, so in just under 2 years from now. The biggest changes are that new supervisors, that is, those who begin providing supervision April 2026 or later, are required to have completed a 30-hour supervision course. Established supervisors, that is, those who began providing supervision before April 2026, are also strongly encouraged to have taken such a course if they haven't already, and to periodically refresh their competence in providing supervision, but they're not strictly required to do so. To help registrants, supervisors, professional associations, and educational institutions prepare for this change, we are developing guidelines on what the course should cover. Stay tuned for the opportunity to comment on a draft in the coming months. In addition, supervisors will be expected to complete a short online module on providing supervision. This is different from the supervision course. This online module will be short, free, and focus on registration and professional practice issues encountered in supervision. We will publish that online module well before the changes take effect in 2026, and we will also go into more detail once the materials come available. Moving on, I'll mention a little bit about what you may have read or heard, that we have a new version of the professional practice standards in effect, which started from January 1st of this year. Standards explain what the minimum expectations are for registrants. They are intended to ensure competent practice, maintain trust, and follow changes in the environment. We are taking several steps to educate and build on the release of the new standards. We are publishing an edited and translated versions online. At the moment, you can read the unedited English version online. We held a webinar last month introducing the standards, which is also available as a recording on our website. We are publishing communique articles highlighting aspects of the new standards. The jurisprudence manual and course, recently updated, provide additional commentary about standards, and hypothetical scenarios illustrate what the standards are about. These scenarios can be found in the case-based assessment, which you'll hear about shortly, and in peer circle cases that registrants can join for continuing education. We plan to send out a survey about the standards in the coming months, as well as publish additional guidance. And we can move on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, everyone. My name is Pam. I'm a policy analyst here at CRPO. And today I'll be telling you a little bit about our upcoming project to review the entry to practice competencies. Next slide, please. If you aren't familiar with what the entry to practice competencies are, the competency profile lists the competencies that must be possessed by individuals entering the profession for the first time in order for them to practice safely, effectively, and ethically across a variety of practice settings. It's what we use to recognize academic programs and what you must match your skills to on the mapping tool during registration. Our entry to practice competencies were last updated in 2012, so it's been quite some time since they were last looked at. Next slide, please. I'll take you through our proposed process we'll be using to review the document. First up is a robust review of other colleges, associations, and agencies' entry to practice competencies. Right now, we have about 15 documents ranging from specific psychotherapy or mental health competencies to targeted DEI, technology, or disability service-based competencies. After reviewing the research, we'll move on to staff roundtables, where we'll discuss with staff any deficiencies or areas for expansion in the competency profile. Next, we'll be sending out a survey to associations and education programs to get their feedback on the current framework. And once all three of those steps have been completed and reviewed, we'll draw up a draft entry to practice competency document. That draft will undergo a full staff review and then move to our registration committee for review and discussion as well. Then we'll begin a targeted stakeholder review. Next, the document would go to council for their awareness before moving into a public consultation where anyone would have the opportunity to provide feedback on the proposed changes, if there are any. Finally, once we get the public feedback, we'll make any necessary adjustments before it will go to council for final approval. Not included in this flowchart, but a very important step, is our DEI working group, who will likely be looking at a portion of or all of any recommended changes. We're not sure yet at which point in the process we'll be seeking their feedback, but the group likely will be involved in the process. Now, you might be wondering to what extent this will impact you or your practice. If you're already registered, it should have no impact on you. As I mentioned earlier, the entry to practice competencies are an aspect of the registration process. They're how we recognize academic programs based on whether or not their program effectively covers the entry to practice competencies. If you apply from a non-recognized program, you'll have to complete the mapping tool, which requires you to match your education, skills, and experiences to the entry to practice competencies. These are some of the areas that will be impacted once the renewed entry to practice competencies work is completed and put in place. And with that, I will pass it off for some updates from our QA program.
Thank you, and I'm going to cover those. Rearrange my screen here. So I wanted to start by talking about the case-based assessment on the next slide. Just a reminder to anybody who hasn't had an opportunity to look at the case-based assessment or been involved in it, it's a risk-based approach that allows RPs to identify opportunities to strengthen their understanding and application of the standards in their practice. It's not an exam, it is low stakes, it's open book, and it's intended to provide registrants and the college with either reassurance that registrants really have a solid mastery of the standards, or an indication that professional development is needed. And there's a whole process that I'll talk about that's in place to provide support for that professional development. At this point, more than 50 registrants have been involved in working with CRPO to develop the case library, the responses, and to do the standard setting that's involved in creating the assessment and making sure it's viable. And we continue to add new people to the process each year as we add new cases to the assessment bank. So we look at the information that is available to us in terms of the standards development that Pam has, that Mark has talked about, as well as practice advisory statistics and complaints and reports. So we look specifically at those standards where we're seeing people potentially struggling, and we work to address those. On the next slide, I'll give you just a couple of links to resources, provide those just so that they're there and they'll be live in the PowerPoint when we post it. If you haven't had a chance to look at them, there's some FAQs. There's also 9 practice cases. We will be adding more practice cases at the end of the spring sitting, which is happening from April the 26th until May the 5th. So we leave that open for 10 days so that people can do the exam, keep doing that, the assessment at any point during the 10 days on their own schedule within a 7-hour window. The other resource that I would point you to is the JRP. I don't have the link here, but we can add that. It is a really comprehensive resource that walks you through all the standards. It does have some practice questions in there so you can sort of assess your knowledge and gives you some really good context so that when you're looking at the standards in preparation for doing the case-based assessment, or just because you want to top up your knowledge, the JRP, you may not have looked at it in a long time. It was renewed and refreshed under Mark's leadership last year. And so it's a really, I think, a very useful tool that you might want to consider checking out. So if we move to the next slide, you can just see some results. I offer these more than anything to reassure folks that people are doing really well. In 2023, 1,724 registrants completed the CBA for the first time, and 8 registrants were reassessed, meaning they completed the CBA twice. The results were really resoundingly reassuring. If you look at that last column, and I know I appreciate that it's very small, but if you look, you'll see that 3% of folks who wrote the assessment in the first go round ended up in the category where they needed peer-assisted review. So I'll walk you through that process really quickly. Successful means that somebody's completed the assessment and they have cleared the cut score, and they're demonstrating 80% mastery or more of each of the standards. And they are free to go on. They won't be asked to do the assessment for another 5 years, and they can choose to do whatever they want in the normal course of things for their professional development over the course of the next 2 years, and simply attest that they've done PD in the way that we've always asked people to note that. Folks who are in the self-directed review bucket are people who were within 1 standard deviation of that mastery. So these are not people who are super concerned about. They are people who have probably got 1 or 2 discrete standards where they could use a top-up. They are asked in their next 2-year cycle of professional development to look at the standards where they might have struggled and to note where they have addressed those standards. It doesn't have to take up all of their 40 hours. Doesn't have to take up any percentage of their 40 hours. We just ask that people do something to make sure that they're familiarizing themselves with standards where they struggle. Folks who are in that last basket, the peer-assisted review, they're more than 1 standard deviation away from demonstrating that they've mastered the standards. And so the process for them is slightly different. First of all, they'll get an hour session, up to an hour, of review of the actual assessment process, just to make sure that they didn't struggle with technology or assessment anxiety or misunderstanding of how to prepare. Staff will work with those folks to make sure they really are comfortable rewriting the assessment in the next go round. So they're asked to rewrite that assessment, and hopefully we'll see that for the most part people will get over whatever had been their barrier to being successful, and will be ready to write and be successful. If they don't manage to do that, they end up in the peer-assisted review stream, which means they will then be assigned a peer coach who will work with them to craft a specific and targeted, focused education plan that they'll be asked to enact over the next 2 years using their professional development. They'll still get to drive what that looks like and what they choose to do. The peer coach will be there to help them identify those resources that would be useful to them in preparing for the assessment so that they can get on with doing it and doing it successfully in the next cycle. So if we look at the other components of the QA program and move on to the next slide, we've got the 2023 professional development cycle. This is the 2-year reporting cycle that most people will be familiar with. So in 2023, we saw 5,798 registrants being required to submit an attestation that they and self-assessment by December the 31st, 2023. And when we looked at it at the end in on March 5th, 2024, there were 143 registrants who had not completed their requirements. So they were at risk of receiving an administrative suspension. We don't like that to happen. We want to work with our registrants. QA is non-punitive. It really is focused on making sure people have the support that they need to do well and to sort of avoid the potential pitfalls that come with standards, lack of familiarity with the standards and lack of professional development. And so staff actually spent a huge amount of time reaching out to those registrants through various methods, through email, through mail for some folks, through telephone. They did a lot of sort of support work to make sure people were aware of what their requirements were and helping them to get those satisfied. And in the end, we had non-responsive registrants totaling 8 who received administrative suspensions. So really not a bad number when you look at the total number of people who were up for PD reporting in 2023. We were quite gratified to see that result. Looking at the last leg of the quality assurance program is the slide looking at the practice advisory service. This is a service that we're really happy to be able to offer to registrants and to the public, although the vast majority of inquiries come through registrants. It is not an emergency line, and so it's not staffed 24/7. We do work with a number of active practice registrants to make sure that we are able to respond to questions with some real clinical knowledge on board. And so this group of professionals working with our really competent staff respond first by email and then if needed by phone to inquiries that come in. We work really hard to get back to people quickly, and we certainly prioritize issues that come in that appear to represent an imminent risk to the practitioner's ability to provide safe and effective care. You can see the list of common topics. Certainly we see some shifts in those. For sure, I will tell you during COVID, 99% of the inquiries we got were related to practicing during the pandemic. But now we see, a slight shift, and certainly there's a bit of a trend in terms of when people come into practice, the kinds of questions they ask. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, when we're doing the case-based assessment development, we look at these kinds of questions to determine what standards we should be focusing on to make sure we're giving people access to support and resources. But really encourage you to use the practice advisory service if you ever have a question. It's not there for legal or financial advice. It really is to help you look at applying the standards to your practice, understanding how those standards need to be applied, and then working through ethical dilemmas if any of them present themselves. So that's a quick walkthrough of the quality assurance program, and I'll pass it off to Jenna Smith to talk about our professional conduct department.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Jenna Smith, and I'm the manager of professional conduct. I'm going to be presenting some information about the trauma review that the college has been working on, and also walk you through some of the stats from the College Performance Management Framework, or the CPMF for short. So if we can go to the first slide. The college set out to review its complaints and reports processes to ensure its practices are responsive to those who report having experienced trauma, are trauma-informed, and also procedurally fair. We know that enhancing support, accommodation, and accessibility reduces the chances of re-traumatization for registrants and members of the public interacting with CRPO's investigation processes. The review was completed by the Barbara Slifer Commemorative Clinic, or the BSCC, over the last year and included a full review of ICRC resources. They also conducted interviews with complainants, registrants, reporters, witnesses, and other individuals involved in the investigation and remediation process. The report from BSCC was recently finalized, which included a list of recommendations the college has committed to exploring. The recommendations cover a range of themes, including government lobbying, the development of internal and external policy, process and guidelines development, communications, staffing, and education and training around topics such as trauma-informed practice, gender-based violence, and legal bullying. In January and April of this year, ICRC met to discuss the prioritization and implementation of those recommendations. So we have a work plan together, and we are currently working through each of those recommendations. Next slide. Before I go through the CPMF, I just wanted to share that staff have undertaken a large-scale review of professional conduct data. So that's outside of what I'll be sharing with you today. The college set out to understand what practice issues registrants struggle with the most and what factors are most likely to predict poor decision-making and negative outcomes for clients. Over the last year, we've coded many years of complaints and reports data. Each file underwent a detailed review, including coding allegations, outcomes, demographic data points about registrants, complainants, reporters, and clients. We also coded areas such as education, supervision, and therapeutic modalities. We know that collecting and analyzing data about complaints and reports will help the college understand and predict patterns of behavior. The data will also be used to develop targeted resources to assist registrants in providing safe and effective care to clients. So what I'm presenting here in front of you right now is the CPMF, which is a very high-level analysis describing conduct data from the last year. So the CPMF counts the calendar year, that would be January 2023 to December 2023. The purpose of the CPMF is to help the public understand how well colleges are doing their job and to help continually improve accountability, transparency, and oversight. All colleges are required to report to the ministry annually. The CPMF covers a wide variety of topics, including how the college is processing complaints and reports about their registrants. As you can see here, we received 106 complaints in 2023. This is up from 76 complaints in the previous calendar year. This is the biggest jump we've ever seen year over year. I think that the public certainly knows we're here and is feeling comfortable bringing their concerns to us. I actually think this is quite positive. I also think this speaks to the steady increase in the number of RPs being registered. In 2023, we opened 17 registrar's reports. This is very similar to previous years. And I do want to just clarify that we received many more reports every year. For example, in the last fiscal year, we actually received 90 reports total, but only a small proportion of reports actually turn into registrar's reports. Reports are opened when an employer or a member of the public brings information to the college's attention and indicates they would like to file a report and not be a party to the investigation. Staff review the report and determine whether there are reasonable and probable grounds to appoint an investigator, at which time it would become a registrar's report. The college takes a right-touch approach to resolving reports, and so for low-risk reports, the registrar may decide it's more appropriate to provide advice, for example, to the registrant, compared to opening a formal investigation. This type of advice would still be part of the registrant's prior history. I also wanted to provide more information here about what happens when staff are preparing the CPMF. We actually code each complaint and report issue twice. First, because we want to know what professional practice standard it relates to, and then also how that fits into the theme described in the CPMF. Just a note that the NR means not reportable, and that indicates the value was less than 5. Please also note that the numbers in each column don't add to the values at the bottom of the chart. That's just because we code each complaint issue. So many times there are 2 to 3 different issues in one complaint. Next slide. So for context measures 6 to 8, these relate to the different files brought forward to ICRC during panel meetings. You will note that ICRC does not currently use ADR or alternative dispute resolution, but this is a topic that's come up at the trauma-informed review to be explored by ICRC at a later date. You'll also note that context measure 9.3 says that ICRC disposed of 14 complaints. This relates to the complaints received in the same calendar year only. Obviously, ICRC disposed of many more complaints last year, and we're going to see that in the next chart. So if you could go to the next slide, please. A total of 62 decisions were issued last year. Remedial agreements, also known as reflection papers, are included in the final column of this table. Reminder that each outcome is coded, and often there are more than one issue and outcome for each decision. Similar to the previous year, ICRC continues issuing a lot of written advice and ordering CRPs under the professional conduct and behavior category. This category includes practice standards on accepting the regulatory authority of the college, disgraceful, dishonorable, and unprofessional conduct, conduct unbecoming, conflict of interest, and also confidentiality. Next slide. This illustrates the maximum length of time in which 9 out of 10 complaints and registrar's reports are resolved. We're currently averaging closer to 340 days to process formal complaints. For registrar's reports, it's closer to 600 days on average. Registrar's reports typically take longer to process because these are the more serious and complex reports. In addition, there are often ongoing court matters proceeding, and in those cases, the college actually has to wait for that matter to resolve before we can commence our investigation. When compared to the work of other RHBA colleges in Ontario, CRPO's numbers do fall within the average processing times. And if we actually look at comparing to other colleges that process similar types of issues, you know, we see a lot of complex relational issues. We're actually doing really well. We have also started measuring timelines for closing reports that don't turn into registrar's reports. These would include files where there are no reasonable and probable grounds for misconduct, or where the file is closed with some written advice from the registrar. And in those cases, we're closing files closer to an average of 160 days. In the last 5 months, we've made some significant changes to the complaints process, which is already resulting in a reduction of processing time. So I'm looking forward to providing an update on that in the fall. That's it for me.
Thank you, Jenna. Before I move on, I just want to note that these slides, we recognize they're busy. All of the slides that Jenna just walked you through are really there just to give her something to walk you through. They're available as part of the College Performance Measurement Framework, which is linked in the presentation. And so you can go and look at any of those and, you know, just in detail, and happy to answer questions about those if they come up for you once you've had a chance to look at CPMS. So yeah, please have a look at that. We'll speak more about it later. I just want to give you a quick update on the work that the college is doing in regards to developing a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. Many of you know we now have a standing working group made up of 15 registered psychotherapists. 11 are returning for a second year of service, and we have 4 new folks who joined in the new year. They're meeting on a monthly basis, and we have a handful of staff, myself, Amy Fournier, Virginia Strobel, Pam Bialik, and others as needed, stepping in to support.
Sorry, Deb, there's a lot of echoing happening. I just wonder if, I don't know if you're able to leave and come back, that usually resolves it. It just seems to be getting a little bit worse.
Thank you. One second, I'll try my best. Is that better?
No, it's definitely echoing.
I'm sorry, I don't know what the issue is. Appreciate you letting me know. Give me a second. Perhaps we could skip ahead. Although I think I'm the last presenter, am I? Probably
Yes.
am. Yeah. Sorry, folks, bear with me here.
Usually when that happens to me, if I leave and then come back, it's better.
I can get started. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, I can get started on the DEI work and the work of the DEI working group while Deb sorts out her audio. So we now have a standing working group made up of 15 RPs serving on the DEI working group. They meet monthly at present. So we have a roadmap in the college performance measurement framework that has several standards related to DEI work, including the development of a specific DEI strategy and the adoption of an equity impact assessment tool. In addition to leading on these two initiatives, a significant part of the work that we're asking the DEI working group to do is to advise on our consultation process to ensure that we're asking the right questions of the right groups and the right individuals. One of the key projects that the DEI working group is leading on is to address the information deficit that we have in regards to our registrants. So we'll be launching a self-identification data collection initiative in the coming months. Council approved of this self-identification data collection at the September meeting. If you want to go back and look at the meeting materials for that council meeting, you can certainly look at the self-ID data that was presented then. And our intention is to look at a comprehensive data set, not just race-based data, and an approach to collecting it. Initiatives that the working group is working on currently, Indigenous Cultural Safety and Humility Standard. They're reviewing some drafts of that, as well as recently the working group completed their work on and made recommendations to council regarding equitable remuneration. So the equitable remuneration rate applies to folks who are appointed to council or committees, professional members who are appointed to committees or council. They can request it from our operations department, and details on the equitable remuneration rate can also be found in our council materials and on our website. Also, the working group is working on the DEI statement of commitment, so a DEI cultural sensitivity and humility standard as well.
Thank you, Amy. Hopefully, am I better? Is it less echoey?
Yes,
Excellent.
it sounds
Sorry
much
about that,
better.
folks. Okay, thank you. 4 years in, and the plague still hobbles us, so sorry about that. I'm going to start talking briefly just about the college performance measurement framework to wrap up the presentation. This is the standard set that the ministry developed for regulators, and this is our 3rd year reporting. This is hyperlinked in the presentation, so people who are interested can go and take a look at it. As I said, the information that Jenna presented is all there. Very happy and quite proud to report, if we move on to the next slide, that we are meeting most of the standards that this sets out. There are the 14 standards within those 7 domains. A lot of the work that we're doing now in regards to things like key performance indicators and risk management reporting are tied to this, so that we can show quite transparently and hopefully, through a straight line, the work we're doing and how we're doing it to get there. On to the next slide, you'll see sorry, I'm moving through my slides now. The standards that we have met partially. There are only 3. One is around the DEI plan. If we move on to the next slide, you can see the specific standard that is being asked of us and the work that we are doing. Amy walked you through the DEI's efforts on that front, and I'm confident that by this time next year, when we're talking about the 2024 report, we'll be able to say that we have a firm and formal plan that's tied to our strategic plan globally and reflected in the work that we do. The next slide is 3.3B, which looks at the equity impact assessments. As Amy noted, one of the pieces that the DEI working group is leading is a self-identification data collection initiative. You will be hearing a lot more about that. We're going to work hard to make sure we're communicating about what we're collecting, why we're collecting, and how we're managing that in terms of security, privacy, confidentiality, and the principles that would put us in the best place to manage that kind of sensitive and important data effectively. Once we have that and we know what our registrants look like, we'll be able to move on and do formal equity impact assessments that will have, I think, some real meaning for us in terms of the ability to detect barriers and to remove them wherever we can, or to mitigate them in those places we can. The final one is 10.1. It's looking at supporting registrants in applying new or revised standards. We are only partially there because we're in the middle of that work. As Pam and Mark discussed, the reviewed and revised standards that were posted on January 1st, we're now in the process of developing the resources and rolling out supports for RPs to make sure that they're comfortable with those standards and aware of any of the changes that have been made. So last slide, with regards to the CPMF, just lists the areas of focus. As I said, so looking at those supports, continuing to articulate the formal diversity, equity, inclusion strategy. We have an RMS system implementation that we're in the midst of. You're going to see more on that front, and hopefully it'll be a user-friendly experience for you. Jenna covered the trauma-informed review and the recommendations that were made there. We're diligently planning and rolling out the work on that. We are working on the rollout of the peer coaching program, which is the final sort of leg to the work of the case-based assessment. And we will be doing an evaluation of the quality assurance program, or planning that, so that we can look at where we are, we're really meeting the mark in terms of being risk-based. And then finally, a bylaw review, which will include public consultation. So I encourage you to look out for that, because it's going to be a place where we really will be interested in hearing your opinion. So questions and answers. As I said, we've been trying to answer the questions, and thanks to staff for your quick typing in the Q&A section. You'll see that. I'll just reiterate in case people missed it at the beginning. We will be posting question and answer sets after every 2 or 3 town halls, just to try and group them together so that they are topic-based. And then we will do a full set at the end of the year based on the topics that we are presenting. We'll be posting those topics and the dates and times, and we'll be sending out emails to remind you that it's happening and to encourage you to post questions relative to those specific topics. I don't see anything open in the Q&A section right now. What's the motivation for the trauma-informed review? Happy to speak to that, and Jenna, please jump in. Certainly, the college has been looking at being trauma-informed across the board and making sure that we are not re-traumatizing folks who are coming through the complaints and reports process, who may have attended therapy because of trauma in the first place, and who, through the their perceived breach or the breach of standards that resulted in the complaint or report that they made about their care, may very well have been traumatized again. We recognize it's a very prescribed process that exists in law. It's the same for all of the colleges, and it can be daunting. We appreciate that. We also know that it can be daunting and traumatizing for registrants to receive complaints, even in cases where there's take no action. And as Jenna sort of reported, there are a vast majority of cases where not taking serious action. Not a lot of cases get referred to discipline. We are taking right touch responses, so that if the response should be a specified continuing education or remediation program, or verbal advice or written advice, that's what we're doing. But we still recognize that the process itself can be difficult for RPs. Nobody is served by the parties involved in that incident being re-traumatized by the college process. So we decided to take a look at the way that we're doing our work. We worked with the Barbara Schleifer Commemorative Clinic because they have a really strong reputation of an intersectional approach looking at the judicial system, and we recognize that a lot of what we do sort of mirrors that. And so our goal is really to make sure that all the people who participate in complaints and reports processes are supported appropriately, and that trauma is mitigated to the best degree possible. How do you know you've been assigned to complete the CBA? There is a fairly involved notification process. I don't have, Sonia, I wonder if I could ask you to step in and answer that question about the process for notifying people of their CBA sitting.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to answer that question. We notify registrants 6 months in advance when they've been selected to complete the CBA. And so this happens in 2 ways. We send out a confirmation questionnaire, and that comes out through an email program called SurveyMonkey. We also follow up with another email to make sure people understand that that's not a spam email, that it's legitimate from CRPO. And then we monitor people. And if people haven't received our communications, we follow up. Staff make every effort to make sure people know they've been selected. We also publish in the monthly communique, when we've sent out notifications, we let people know that we've notified people for the fall CBA, for example, and that hopefully will trigger people to check their emails, check their spam, and to see if they've been notified.
Thanks, Sonia. Somebody's posted a question. I noticed it doesn't seem to be specific standards regarding culturally informed sensitive care. Correct. Sorry, and I should have spoken to that. The working group, the DEI working group, is currently in the process of developing with staff a non-discrimination and cultural safety standard that's about to go through the next iteration of review by the QA committee before going to public consultation, and an Indigenous cultural safety and humility standard, which will follow the same process. So those two are coming. We didn't want to withhold the rest of the standards, which were complete, while we waited for the DEI working group to really have the time to workshop the best possible version of those two standards. So you will see those, and we'll be publishing those and the consultation process for those in the coming months. Right touch regulation response. Sure, I can speak to that. One of my favorite topics. So the notion of right touch regulation is that you are using the least amount of regulatory force possible, and you're doing the most you can to support professionalism. So the kind of work that we do around the standards and the quality assurance is to help professionals self-regulate, which is really the key to that. So a right touch response would be that we are obligated to do thorough investigations of everything, but unless we find a real evidence that there is misconduct or incompetence, we start with the lower risk responses, taking no action, providing advice, asking for a scope to be completed. And so really the notion of right touch is across the board. It's not just in the conduct department. It is also in the case-based assessment, for example. So the goal there is to right touch and risk-based go hand in hand. So we work to assess risk with the registrant before any remediation is required. And so the goal is to really gear the solution to the problem, as opposed to just having three tools that we use over and over again. So the goal with right touch is, as I said, to really have that balance, the equilibrium between professional self-regulation and professionalism, and the college's infrastructure, which is there to sort of require and make transparent the accountability measures that registrants are responsible for. Yes, so the CBA is very separate and very different than the registration exam. The registration exam is an exam, and despite my verbal slip before, the case-based assessment is not. It is open book. It is intended to allow you to sit with the standards and work through them to learn about them. It's a learning exercise for those who need it. The entry to practice exam is a national, it's third-party administered. It is required within the first 2 to 5 years of your registration with CRPO, and it is considered high stakes because it is tied to ongoing registration with the college. Very different from the CBA. The trauma-informed review, somebody's asking where can we review the recommendations. Those were included, I believe, in the December council meeting or the September council meeting. Sorry, somebody remind me.
It's the December meeting.
Thank you. The December council meeting, and we can pop a link to that in the Q&A when we post them. I recognize that we are about to run out of time, and so I think we should move on to the thank you part of the lunch hour. We really do appreciate people coming and attending. We appreciate you giving up your lunch. We look forward to seeing you some more. I'll pass it off to Ken just to say the final thanks before we sign off.
Yes, again, to reiterate what Deb just said, thank you to you all. I scrolled through the screens on the side to see how many participants there were today, and it was quite a few of you, and so I'm quite thankful for that, and it shows the interest and dedication for all of you to the profession and your interest in the college. And so hopefully you'll all get an opportunity to participate again in the future town halls. And we'll, as Deb mentioned, I believe, staff will be happy to answer any of your questions after the fact as well. So all the best to you all. And I guess we can sign off on that note. Okay, take care, folks.